Tara, there's still people in the waiting room. Or somebody's outside.
Yeah. So we'll keep on acting on the way to the host. And then without further ado, I'll give the floor to Anne.
Okay, thank you very much, Anta. Welcome everybody to St. Mary's University, Twickenham. It's wonderful to see you all here together today and to see everybody online joining us as well. You're more than welcome. I am moderator for this event and will hand over to one of our colleagues, Ruth van Dijk, who is going to say some words with regards to housekeeping and practical elements for all of us. So over to you, Ruth.
Okay, I'm just coming here so you can hear me. For those of you in the room, there is no fire alarm scheduled. So if it does come off, just follow us out of the room and downstairs and out towards the chapel. There is a toilet. It's around the corner if anyone needs it. We're hoping that there will be some time at the end for questions. So those of you who are online, if you could put the questions in the chat. For those of you who are in the room that might have a question, either you'll need to speak loudly or we'll repeat it. Can we ask everybody to make sure you keep your mics off because there can be background noise. And just to say for the speakers who are online, we have got your slides. And as you go through your presentation, when you want the slide to be changed, just say, next slide, please. And our assistants here, Anta or Vidisha, will change the slides. So we each have about kind of 15 minutes. Okay, so that's the housekeeping.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ruth. And without further ado, I want to make reference to this seminal piece of research that's being launched today entitled Legal Practitioners Work with Victims of Human Trafficking and the training required to undertake this work and resources to aid them in 5 countries, member countries of the RENATE Europe network, namely Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Spain, and the United Kingdom. And I want to acknowledge the work of the team here at St. Mary's University, and in particular the acting director, Dr. Where have I got my here? Carol Murphy, yes, and at Bikita Centre for Research on Slavery, Exploitation and Abuse, and Anta, Vidisha and the team locally, and then of course the team of grassroots level out in the network as well who have informed the research. So it really has been a marvellous collaborative process that has led us to this day. I'd like to welcome in particular David Ryle, representing the Cardinal Nichols this afternoon, who's with us present in person. And amongst our guests is the former president of RENATE, the RENATE network, Imelda Poole. Welcome, Imelda. And to my right are some of our guest speakers. And I'll hand over to the co-president of RENATE, Mary Power, to welcome everybody. Thank you.
You'll be welcome so often now today. You'll be well welcomed. And I just want to add my welcome to you all and thank you very much for coming. And particularly to the people online who are with us internationally. So it's lovely to see familiar names coming in. So thanks very much for joining us. I think in RENATE's fight against human trafficking, excuse me, we believe that a major part of our work is prevention and also through education and the support of survivors. We have in the past produced some reports, all of them to enable us, our collaborators and friends, to be more informed about the situation and what we can do to remedy it. I think now, while many more resources are directed towards the global south, I think this is right. But nonetheless, fight against human trafficking has to go on in Europe. After all, we're a major destination and ascending and transit countries. So I think it's important that we continue to highlight what's happening in Europe because it seems to have gone a bit on the back burner and it's very much a live issue. And we will continue to raise awareness and to fight against this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, and for setting the context and again for the welcome, which won't go astray. We are kind of tight for space, so bear with us in terms of people moving around. There's plenty of space in the room, but just up here at the top table, very little to do with us and our girth and size, I'd say. It has more to do with furniture, but essentially we have. Bear with us, there will be some movement of people from chairs back down to the audience seating. I'd like to introduce you to Brian O'Toole, who is the Director of the Justice Desk with the Presentation Congregation Ireland and the UK. Brian is also the country representative on the RENATE Working Board. He represents Ireland. But beneath all of that is a person with a huge human rights drive and a sense of civic social thinking and very much Catholic social teaching informing his practice and his very living. So we're very fortunate that Brian has taken a lead role in the context of coordinating and driving and getting everybody to target in relation to this piece of research. So I'll hand over to Brian to give an overview and to share with us some perspectives on the research. Brian.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And I will welcome you all once again, as well. As Mary said, you'll be welcomed out of it. But thank you is the very first thing I really wanted to say, for being with us and supporting our collaborative efforts. RENATE are really very, very proud of the work that has been undertaken with the Bakita Centre in St Mary's University in Twickenham that has culminated in the launch of this important research today. Online, we have many of the RENATE Law Task Group members, all living in different countries, quiet heroes, all of them inspiring sisters and friends, working with and working for victims. They have been the driving force behind this particular research today. For those of you gathered here and online, those who are new to RENATE, you should know that RENATE stands for the Religious in Europe Networking Against Trafficking and Exploitation, and we have a presence in 31 countries and collaborate with upwards of 139 networks, all working tirelessly to rehabilitate victims, to free the world of human trafficking, labour exploitation and modern slavery. But articulated clearly in the RENATE mission statement is the willingness and the need to challenge the judicial and civil authorities to adopt and enforce legislation that protects victims, provides them with adequate compensation, punishes clients and buyers, and seizes the assets of perpetrators. And it is this specific part of our mission that has inspired the 22-member RENATE Law Task Group to commission the Bakita Centre to undertake the research that you will hear a little bit more about today. You should know too that this substantial report is building on previous research, because just before COVID, RENATE once again commissioned the Bakita Centre to undertake research in a short period of time across 6 European countries: Albania, Bulgaria, England and Wales, Germany, Romania and Spain. And this research was essentially a mapping exercise to identify and shine a light on 3 specific areas that relate to the legal supports for victims of human trafficking. Firstly, we wanted to check on the awareness of victims of human trafficking with respect to their rights and legal entitlements. And secondly, what of their ability to access these legal supports? And thirdly, what of the quality of the legal supports that are available? You can access this report and the one we're launching today on the RENATE website straight after this launch. The results of the first piece of research indicated to us the obvious needs of those who genuinely work tirelessly to support victims. And in this grouping, we counted a small but dedicated cohort of lawyers, legal practitioners, police and NGOs who in many cases are the first trusted point of contact for victims. The new research is clear that those who are charged with legally supporting victims of human trafficking or modern slavery very often do so with limited support themselves. They work in challenging conditions. The work is slow. The caseload is high. Training can be largely absent, and all of this often for very little pay. In many cases, lawyers quietly support victims long after their work obliges them to, such as the need and the vulnerability. The work is neither attractive nor lucrative, but this report alerts us to not only the importance of those who take on this work, but also the need for more to shoulder what is an increasingly heavy burden. In this report, we conducted surveys and interviews of legal practitioners working in 5 of the 6 countries we mentioned earlier: Albania, Bulgaria, Spain, and Romania, and the United Kingdom. We found it difficult to conduct this research in Germany, where sex work is legal, and it's more difficult to identify those who are trafficked. We needed the contacts of the RENATE network to encourage those who are already overworked to assist us in this research. Cold calling overworked lawyers to participate in valuable research doesn't really work. There needed to be personal contact, phone calls, individual emails, physical contact with known sisters and others to try and engage as many legal practitioners as possible so that this research would be credible. Networking is a strength of RENATE. And clearly in this research, the findings are such that collaboration appears key to making any lasting difference. As they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And this is clearly the thinking of all who generously participated in this research. What really stands out in this research is the commitment, the hard work, and the support of the unstinted support, and above all, what is expected well beyond what lawyers are being paid to do. The report is peppered with real quotes that give a real sense of the difficulties experienced by legal practitioners who speak to their real experience. But very often what we're hearing from lawyers is the plea for a joined up system that trains, that resources, that advocates and supports, but only when we consider that the victim is at the centre. One lawyer put it really well when he said, it's not just survivors who are negatively impacted by limited legal aid capacity. It's also the practitioners who advise survivors. They have to manage heavy caseloads. And the pressure of being a key person in a survivor's journey. They also have to make decisions about who they can help. And all of this can be very stressful. One solicitor spoke of the fear and anxiety of working with these often very traumatic human trafficking cases. That being so overworked, the worry of making a mistake or dropping the ball or missing something can be catastrophic for a victim. And it could be one reason that he might lose sleep. Too many lawyers spoke of the complete absence of formal training on human trafficking whilst in university. Others spoke of learning on the job, which they admit is not ideal. After all, would you allow a doctor to treat you if he didn't have the formal training or was just thinking on his feet? Some lawyers felt that this was the only way they could operate. In nearly all cases, lawyers spoke of poor fees, delayed payment, too many cases, complicated cases, time-consuming cases, but sometimes very necessarily so. When lawyers are being trained, they're very often shaped and moulded in such a way that their legal dealings with people are adversarial. They're trained to be confrontational in nature. But when a potential victim of human trafficking presents, there needs to be an empathy, a gentle patience, a willingness to wait until a relationship can be built up, a learned ability to listen deeply, non-judgmentally, with their whole being, in order to be able to work with the sincerity for a victim. There is very little training for this. In this report, one lawyer put it really well when he said, what does it mean victim-centered? In a short sentence, I would say the victim is the leader of all our intervention. The protagonist is the victim. So all our services, all our information, all our goodwill has to build around the victim. How far can she go? How far can he go? I can see potentially some people I can help grow and unfold this potential. A lawyer's first advice might be around identification. This might be supplemented by immigration advice, housing advice, legal advice, or even family advice. Sometimes victims are criminalized, despite the guarantee that the non-punishment principle affords. I should explain that the non-punishment principle means that the trafficked person should not be punished for criminal acts arising out of their situation as a trafficked person, because the trafficked person is not a free agent. They are compelled to commit an unlawful act. And while there's an awful lot of talk about compensation for victims, you should know that there is very, very little success. Sometimes the interest in a victim and the level of support offered by a state is contingent upon a successful conviction of a perpetrator. And often support can melt away quickly if a prosecution looks less likely. So you can see how quickly a case can become complicated and might require different types of legal advice. And all the time, this is only exacerbated by the utter fear of a victim who is now reaching out to a lawyer and putting all of their trust in them. The lawyers remind us constantly that it is precisely this trusting nature that has landed a victim where they are now. So you can see how conflicted a victim might be. One particular quote from a Spanish lawyer in the report comes to mind when he said, "Victims of human trafficking in most cases have been deceived by someone they trust a lot. So they wouldn't invest the same trust in us as lawyers. From the beginning, there is a lack of trust. It is part of all the first meetings. Well, okay, a victim might say, I trust you, but I will keep a lot from you because I was hurt so much by someone I really trusted my whole life." So I, the legal practitioner, will say, I think trust is built incrementally, bit by bit, with visible, concrete results. It can be very small results. So our responsibility is to make sure that this trust is not broken. Research reports are typically a report on a niche research that has been undertaken on a specific topic, and sometimes can be a dull read unless you have a specific interest. However, this report, I contend, is one that should be read by all and must be read by many. This report has a heart and hope. It clearly shows that there is a devoted and dedicated cohort of lawyers struggling to support victims of human trafficking. This report comes with clear, country-specific recommendations, as well as well-thought-out recommendations for RENATE, for our next steps in how we might advocate for change that the legal practitioners are calling for, but haven't the time to work for. Before I give way to Ruth, who will speak next, I do want to take a moment to thank all in St. Mary's, and the RENATE Law Task Group, and the RENATE Core Group, and the Conrad Hilton Foundation, who were the ultimate funders of this work. I also want to thank you, those in the room who've turned up and those online. And I would ask that maybe that this research, that you would take some time to learn a little bit more about what this report has to say. So can I please urge that when the launch is over, you will take the time to download the report from the RENATE website and even just read, please, a few pages every day. That would be great. That would be really great. And when you read the report, you will feel the heartache of the victims. You will be heartened that there are good people who try very hard without much notice or praise or even proper payment to make a lasting difference for damaged victims. These legal practitioners are very often at the heart of pro bono legal networks of lawyers without whom even much less might be done. And finally, once you read the report, can I then ask that you will do one more thing? Please share the report and talk about it. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you very much, Brian, and ending with an impassioned plea there to all of us to do something very simple, really very simple. Just read the report, internalize it, bring it to life, animate it as best we can, and then I suppose in many senses look to ensure that the legal practitioners who have voiced so many concerns and who've called out for us and reached out to us to make sure that their voices are heard in terms of training and education and structures for them as well. The ultimate beneficiaries, of course, are those who have been vulnerable to trafficking and those with the lived experience. So thank you, Brian. This leads us very nicely and in a timely fashion, I have to say, thank you, Brian, to Ruth van Dijk, who is going to present a summary of the report. And Ruth is the legal researcher of this particular piece of research. And Ruth is an honorary research fellow at the Bakita Centre here at St. Mary's University. So over to you, Ruth, to give us a summary of the report.
I would like to start by paying tribute to the work of legal practitioners who provide assistance to victims and survivors of human trafficking and modern slavery. The work they do is invaluable and often a necessity to ensure that those who are vulnerable and have experienced human rights abuses are identified as victims and consequently have access to support and services which aid their recovery, empowerment, restitution, and reintegration. It is clear that the work of legal practitioners requires compassion and empathy, and those we engaged with were very passionate about their work. They identified that their work is complex, time-consuming, underfunded, and can lead to vicarious trauma. As Brian said, this report builds on the 2012 report that was written by my colleagues DM2 Tran and Dr. Anta Brachu. The reports that's being launched today was also commissioned by the RENATE Law Task Force Group, and it involved the collection of data from legal practitioners in 5 countries with 58 lawyers participating in the research through interviews or completing a survey. This research had a different focus and aimed to look at the kinds of work with victims of human trafficking that was undertaken by legal practitioners and how this work was funded, to identify how they acquired the knowledge and skills they needed to work with victims, to explore the knowledge and skills they felt legal practitioners required to provide quality legal advice, and finally to identify the challenges legal practitioners face in undertaking their work. It became apparent while doing this research that practitioners' advice has been invaluable to the individuals they assist, but the work they do also has much wider impacts. They have played a strategic role in their countries by seeking to enhance the professional knowledge of other lawyers as well as law enforcement officers. They've also helped develop strategies to improve survivors' access to quality legal advice. They've advocated for better provision on behalf of survivors, and they have tried to hold governments to account, sometimes by challenging their policy and practice. For example, legal practitioners in the UK have played a key role in challenging recent government legislation that has made the identification and support of victims of modern slavery much more difficult. The work of legal practitioners is fundamental to ensuring that countries fulfill their obligations under Article 15 of the Council of Europe Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings, which gives victims of trafficking the right to legal assistance and free legal aid, as well as a right to compensation. The group of experts that monitors the implementation of the Council of Europe Convention has stated that legal assistance is crucial to ensure survivors of human trafficking can access their rights, as civil, administrative, and criminal proceedings are often very complex. Interviews with legal practitioners, as well as information collected from the surveys, highlighted the many different ways that lawyers have been involved in advising and assisting victims and survivors of human trafficking and modern slavery. It encompassed advice related to accessing rights, assistance with welfare, family, and housing issues, help dealing with immigration issues, information about criminal justice processes, and assistance with compensation claims. In some places like Albania and Spain, survivors were able to access legal advice very early, and lawyers were able to help ensure that they were recognized as victims of human trafficking. This was especially important as police officers often have a limited understanding of human trafficking and its indicators, and thus might not identify them. As a result, legal practitioners have played a role in the identification process and consequently ensured survivors were able to access protection and support. In addition, their actions have put pressure on police to undertake a criminal investigation of human trafficking rather than a lesser or different offense. In some countries, there is provision for legal assistance when survivors agree to participate in a criminal investigation and prosecution. This might entail information about how the criminal justice process works, as well as information about their rights, which might include a legal defense, which means they cannot be prosecuted for some offenses committed while being trafficked. A lawyer is thus available to look after survivors' interests and needs which may not be adequately represented in systems where the focus of police officers, prosecutors, and defense lawyers is with the defendants. Bulgarian legal practitioners talked about how they might advocate on behalf of survivors who agreed to be witnesses in a criminal investigation to ensure that police interviews were more victim-centered and thus limited in terms of time and number, because these can be re-traumatizing. Legal practitioners work in a variety of settings, but many of those that participated in the research work in specialist NGOs that offer support to victims of human trafficking. They were often able to provide holistic and long-term support because legal assistance was a central part of the provision they offered. Nevertheless, practitioners who worked in other settings, including law firms, sought to deal with the range of legal issues that affected a survivor, not just the initial presenting legal issue. Cristina Carrera from the Spanish NGO Diaconia will provide further insight into the work of legal practitioners undertake with survivors a bit later. All of this work, of course, has to be funded, and research identified the funding of legal assistance as one of the key challenges that aids or impedes the provision of services to survivors of human trafficking. What is evident from this research, as well as other studies and Greta's monitoring reports, is that government funding of legal assistance for victims of human trafficking is inadequate. This was especially the case in relation to free legal aid schemes. Although Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Spain, and the UK in principle have schemes in place, the criteria to access free legal aid can prevent survivors from accessing it, and the legal aid systems can be bureaucratic. The monies allocated do not cover the complexity and longevity of cases. Underfunding of legal aid has thus reduced the number of lawyers who provide legal aid work, and thus it can be difficult to find practitioners able to take on a case, particularly those who have the necessary expertise. Moreover, free legal aid may not cover all the areas where legal advice is needed. For example, pre-referral to a national referral mechanism so that survivors have the information to make an informed choice about their options. Or, for example, in the UK, to get help applying to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority. Legal assistance has been in part funded by governments through the legal aid systems or through the funding of services provided by NGOs. However, it was clear from the interviews that many NGOs had to draw on monies raised through donations in order to provide their holistic and long-term advice. Practitioners working for law firms also had to find ways to obtain the funds they needed to provide the necessary advice required by survivors. Lack of adequate funding continues to mean that there are survivors who are not able to access their rights to legal advice. It has also hampered victims who seek compensation for the harm done to them and who might want to ensure that a financial penalty is also attached to traffickers. Another key issue explored in the research is how practitioners acquired the knowledge and skills they needed to provide quality legal assistance to victims and survivors of human trafficking. Except for Romania, most of the participants in the study indicated that they did not receive any formal legal education which covered human trafficking. Some had studied human rights or immigration laws or learned how to support victims of crime as part of their formal education, and this knowledge was useful in their work with survivors. However, most participants relied on a range of strategies to help them acquire the knowledge and skills they needed for their work. This included in-house training, shadowing legal practitioners, talking with and learning from colleagues, doing their own research, drawing on the expertise of practitioners in their network of key contacts, and attending specialist training sessions organized at local, regional, national, or international level. Nevertheless, practitioners indicated that learning had to be an ongoing activity because policy changed, and so did human trafficking, in terms of victims' characteristics, forms of exploitation, and the means used by traffickers to control them. Many of these practitioners participating in the research were using the knowledge and skills they acquired to offer training for those working in the field who want to or need to improve their practice. We will hear from Lindsay Kundal, a lawyer working for ATLU, the Anti-Trafficking and Labor Exploitation Unit, about the training they have developed in order to help legal practitioners who work with survivors of human trafficking and modern slavery. Legal practitioners also identify the different kinds of knowledge and skills that lawyers would require to provide quality legal assistance. And interestingly, there were many similarities about the knowledge and skills required across the 5 countries. For example, it was said that lawyers who seek to work in this field need a clear understanding of what human trafficking is, including relevant indicators for identifying victims of trafficking. They need to know how trafficking presents itself in their country and some awareness of its effects on victims, for example, trauma. Without this clear understanding of the phenomena of human trafficking and how it is codified in law, they cannot act as survivor advocates. However, it was felt that it was not enough just to know national legislation that had an impact on human trafficking. Practitioners also needed to understand the international legal landscape that sets standards and case law on human trafficking. In addition, practitioners needed to understand the bigger policy landscape because of its implications for victims as they set out various entitlements for victim support and for establishing their immigration status. Understanding the impact of trauma on victims was also considered as crucial, as well as learning how practitioners could mitigate the risk of re-traumatization during their interactions with victims. Being able to work collaboratively was also identified as a key skill, as lawyers working with survivors will have to help them navigate through many different institutional processes and service providers. Treating survivors with respect and the ability to build trust were also identified as essential skills and necessary to creating a positive working relationship between legal practitioners and survivors. Lawyers will have to earn the trust of survivors they work with, as previously as victims of human trafficking, they have been lied to and betrayed by those who exploited them. Later, Sosa Henkoma, in conversation with Phil Brewer, will talk about his experience with legal practitioners as a survivor of human trafficking for criminal exploitation. Another challenge that legal practitioners face concerns the definitions of human trafficking and entitlement for victims. The policy response to human trafficking may be limited and focused on the criminal code. As a result, practitioners have found it more difficult to respond to the needs of survivors and to hold governments to account in relation to prevention, protection, and prosecution. Miriam Demnusha from the Albanian NGO Different and Equal will talk about the importance of a unified law on human trafficking, something NGOs in both Albania and Spain have been advocating for many years. The research also highlighted good practice that has been developed in all 5 European countries. It features a holistic response to survivors' legal needs, where practitioners have adopted a victim-centered and trauma-informed approach to their work. Moreover, it is one where, as a trusted professional, they accompany survivors on their recovery journey and in some cases continue to provide advice and advocacy in relation to emerging legal issues as they reintegrate into society. The report also illustrates the many different ways that legal practitioners have also taken strategic action to improve practice, to develop the capacity of professionals to respond to human trafficking, and to advocate for policy change or to challenge government decisions in court. Finally, based on the research findings, recommendations have been proposed for each country. They aim to address critical gaps in legal assistance, collaborative responses, compensation schemes, and victim-centered support for survivors of modern slavery and human trafficking. Members of RENATE may find these useful, as well as those particular recommendations for RENATE going forward. Finally, I want to express my appreciation to all the legal practitioners who contributed to this report, some of whom are attending this launch. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you do find the report useful.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for a very comprehensive summary of the report, and certainly makes me want to pick up the document and go through it with more intensity than I would have originally planned to. Ruth has taken us through a variety of aspects of legal practitioners' work as they seek to address the complex issues that those with the lived experience have to contend with. And she has also highlighted the lack of resources and adequate funding to provide support to survivors, plus funding for the entire provision of formal training for those who are involved with regards to criminology and human trafficking. It's interesting to hear her say about learning has to be ongoing for practitioners, and that in itself will make its own demands. It is a critical understanding as human trafficking and its complexities continue to evolve, and thus the legal practitioners equally need to evolve in their learning. Finally, a look at the international legal landscapes and policy landscapes gives us an idea of the complexity of the issues that need to be addressed by legal practitioners serving to ensure the rights of those with the lived experience of human trafficking. So all in all, a comprehensive summary. Thank you very much, Ruth, and the encouragement to others to go and read the report and to make use of it as well. So that leads us very nicely on to our colleagues here to my right, who have changed places. Thank you, Phil and Susa. I'd like to introduce you to Phil Brewer, to my right, retired from the Metropolitan Police Service since 2019. Phil is a specialist advisor on modern slavery at the Human Trafficking Foundation here at the university. Phil also is an honorary research fellow at the Bakita Centre here, and he's accompanied by Susa Ngoma, person with lived experience of child criminal exploitation. And for the next 10 to 15 minutes, they will be in dialogue together. So over to you.
And thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. Just to make an admission, Sosa and I are good friends, so hopefully this will flow quite nicely. And I guess we've had many discussions on many things over the last couple of years, and this is something that I've never really had a discussion with you about specifically.
No.
So I'm quite interested, to be honest. Through your journey, you had a lot of legal support, some good, some not so good.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you're able to sort of summarise during that journey at the various stages how that felt to you. What were the standout features of the support that you received?
I'll definitely say, especially from legal side, my solicitor was a bit different from from every other solicitor, where she did not come standingly where it was just a personal type of thing. It was more, we built an actual relationship where it was a positive relationship where I actually felt like I could trust this woman and this woman had my interest at heart. But previously to other solicitors, if we was going to talk about criminal, because that was my immigration solicitor, but if we was going to speak about my criminal solicitors, it was more of a fact of getting a task and a job done. So for me, it was always a fact of like, oh, we just need to move on to the next case, or this is just going to be, you fit in this box and you're more likely to just get this sentence or everything else. But for me growing up, I never felt like I fitted in any box that people tried to put me in. And then to have my immigration solicitor at the age of, I think I was 21 at that moment of time, but to have my immigration solicitor at the age of 21 being the only person to ever listen to me and see me for a victim of modern-day slavery. But previously to other solicitors, it was always a fact of, oh, he committed a crime and he needs legal help. And that's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to look deeper and we're not going to focus on anything else because that's not what we're here for. But my immigration solicitor was able to look deeper. And I would say even connection-wise, like she didn't just come on a fact of, oh, you know, you need to tell me this bit about the exploitation or this bit about everything else. It was just the fact of tell me your story from the start to the end. That's what she asked for. She didn't ask for anything much, just asked to tell me a story from the start to the end. And even when there was bits she didn't understand, because obviously like there was always, I'll say, language barrier, where it's not always language where we speak, I might speak English and Phil might speak Spanish or something. It can be literally the dialogue that I speak differently from my solicitor. So sometimes she may not understand what I was saying. So she would ask me, oh, what do you mean by this? And that's her being professionally curious, not her actually, you know, shaming me, blaming me, or making me feel a type of way. It's just her just asking me because she doesn't understand how I speak. So things like that.
And I guess so just listening to what you're saying, it's that, and I think it was Brian mentioned it before. It's about that relationship building as well, and that's not always easy in a professional setting. It sounds like your immigration solicitor managed that, and I'll just say, I'll ask the question why. Why do you think that approach was different, and how was it different?
It was a lot different because she came from a fact of she didn't know it all. And she just wanted to know. She just wanted to know what the story was behind everything. And also she was relatable, not in a relatable as in she related to my experience. She related to the fact of I'm currently in a position where I feel vulnerable. I'm currently in a position where I feel low. I'm currently in a position where right now I don't know what my future is going to be. And she related to that, and she was able to speak to me on the fact that obviously I would say there was times in my journey, my legal journey, where I felt like giving up because I thought to myself that no one's going to listen. This is too much, even though we have one lady trying, but it's just one lady. And that was it for me. So, and for her, she never gave up. And to really survive, to even to sit here, to be speaking in front of you guys, is due to my solicitor. Because if my solicitor didn't have that, you know, oh, I'm not going to listen to you saying, because at one point I was going to sign the papers and get sent back home. Because for me, it's that I don't want to be in prison for any longer than I should be. And if I'm going to be deported, and this was being said, I might as well get deported. No one's going to listen that I've been exploited. No one's going to listen or listen to my story. No one ever listened. And for her to tell me, no, we're still going to fight it. And for me to be able to be here and tell you guys, this is my experience, it shows that good practice, that trauma-informed practice actually works. That relatable practice work coming from being professionally curious with a survivor, that works. So yeah.
Okay, and I know I shouldn't do this, and I promise I'll bring the room back onto a positive, but just talk about what didn't work so well. What were the occasions where things didn't work, and why?
I would say 100%. It didn't work previously with, like I explained before, criminal solicitors, because it was more of a fact of like they were just reading it on the surface, not looking deeper. And it's easy to see someone for just what's written on paper, because if my immigration solicitor looked at what was written on paper, it said that I was violent, I was aggressive, I was all these type of things, I was volatile, all these words that were used to describe me. But the person that she met in person was totally different. So it's actually looking deeper. So I'll definitely say that, you know me, I don't like talking, I like talking about people.
I knew you wouldn't name names. So as for legal practitioners, if you were able to provide feedback or give advice in terms of what they should consider to actually improve the service that they provide, what would they be?
Honest truth, yeah. I would say treat them like your own.
Mm-hmm.
Give them the service that you would want your children to be given. Give them the service you would want your cousin or your uncles or your aunties or your daughters or your son to be given. Treat them like your own. That's the only thing I can say. My solicitor treated me like her own. She fought for me like her own, and I can vouch for that. Like, she never gave up. She always went above and beyond. And even when I felt like other services weren't obviously doing what they were meant to be doing, she made sure them services were able to be accountable for their actions. So for me, 100%, treat them like your own.
I know, obviously, the solicitor you've mentioned, and I won't embarrass him by naming names in terms of where the service that really made a difference for you. But in terms of general support for lawyers, and picking up on what Ruth said as well, particularly around how hard this can be from a professional perspective in terms of dealing with these cases. How do you think lawyers could be better supported?
100%. I would definitely say, you've definitely said it. Vicarious trauma is that most of the time lawyers are hearing all of these stories and different type of stories, and for them, it's hard for them to take that home and obviously then go live their personal life. And I feel like that's not taken into consideration. That at the end of the day, even though that they are lawyers and they're meant to fight your legal battles, they're not no super people. They're still human beings. They still need that care. They still need that service where they're able to offload and also able to have. I think me and Tony were speaking earlier on, where we was talking about at the end of the day, to this day on, I still have a mentor. I still have someone that I speak to. I still have someone that I have to address with. Like, so at the end of the day, I feel like even lawyers, they still need that form of, care, that peer-to-peer support, that peer-to-peer care.
So it's about looking after yourself as well.
100%. And it's all about collaboration too, because at the end of the day, it takes a village to raise a child. So really and truly, it takes a whole partnership and a whole everyone holding hands to help a survivor.
Right. So in addition to your studies, I'm going to make you sound really like we're really busy now. So in addition to your studies here at St Mary's, completed your foundation, about to move on to undergrad criminology. What are you laughing at? I've already given you the question. You're also a consultant and also a mentor as well. So, working in that environment, if you were able to provide, I know you've sort of spoken about this in terms of that, how building trust, etc. But if you were able to give legal practitioners advice in terms of their approach, what would that be?
I'll say be authentic. Literally, obviously, where I come from, we have a thing called selling people a dream. And that means telling them something that you're not able to obviously hold up to. So just literally tell them the truth, what you can actually do, what you can't do. Just be you, be you. That's all you can do. Like I feel like sometimes people feel like they have to do the absolute most. More really and truly, if you just actually are honest about what you can do, that person is able to understand, okay, this is as far as you can take. Cool, what are we going to do next? I'm going to say to you. So just be authentic.
Final question, I promise you.
You didn't send us some more questions, man.
I honestly
send us some more questions. No, this question's the added questions.
Right, final question. You work with young people in particular in terms of supporting them and helping them sort of make the right life choices. And I appreciate it's not always within their gift to choose the right legal practitioner, but what advice would you give them in terms of when they're seeking that legal advice? How would you advise them to do that?
I would say, especially if you're from the community I would say if you're from where I'm from, most of my young people, we know real recognize real. So from when you come into the room, if you're not genuine, we can tell already. And from then we shut down. So for most young people in there, I would say, obviously, still give them a chance and don't fold yet. That's the best one I always say, don't fold yet. But really and truly, young people understand that if someone is genuine and someone isn't, and they will 100% engage with someone who they feel is actually there for them. So really and truly, it's not on the young person, it's on a professional. You can't blame a child on how he's engaging.
But it's about that, you've spoken about this a lot. It's about that being genuine.
100%.
It's listening.
That's it.
And it's building trust.
Just open, just having that ears open and also able to ask that question. If you don't understand something, ask the question. And if at the end of it, just clarify with that young person, is that what you meant? Is this what you meant? Like, so they're able to feel like they have some form of autonomy in that situation. Because you're forgetting you're dealing with survivors. Their autonomy has been taken all their life. And at the end of the day, as legal and even as some form of support, we're meant to be empowering them and giving them back the autonomy. So just little things like that builds that.
And I think that's a really important point to finish off on, Sosa, is that it's that bit about not being worried, and this is from a professional's point of view, not being worried or embarrassed about asking a question when you don't understand.
100%. You're older, you ask me questions a lot of times.
You know, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses.
That's me doing with the kids, you doing the professional.
So, thank you. Anne, that's you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much. That has been a wonderful insight into a dialogue that many of us would love to have taken part in, and it was really lovely to see the animation between Phil and Sosa. And thank you in particular, Sosa, for sharing the gems of wisdom with us through that lived experience. Very much living proof that the trauma-informed practice really works. I think one of the elements that's coming through as we're halfway through the launch here is trust, relationship, being in right relationship, and actually having the humility about our practice to be able to say, I don't have all the answers. Tell me your story. I just thought that just rocked me here, just as a regular human being, the sense of interest and curiosity that we should all have in one another. And through even just asking that question, there's a humility behind that, so that you actually engage in a trusting way with somebody who will gradually reveal that bit more, and therefore empower us to do that bit more ourselves as well too. I was also struck, Susan, by the very concern that you had, not only for yourself, of course, but for the lawyers themselves, even seeing their needs, even in times of your own needs and the time of your own pain and difficulties and frustrations, but having that other-centeredness really highlights the character, the nature of the person who obviously is a great leader in his own right within community as well. So congratulations, Sosa, and thank you very much indeed for that very, very informative and human dimension. Thank you, Phil and Sosa. So we're just going to move into the realm now of technology online, and hopefully everything will work for us online. We're at the mercy of technology, I guess. It has its positives and negatives, but its positives in this regard, in that we have Lindsay Condell, who is now let me get this right, Lindsay is the immigration solicitor and public law supervisor and training lead at the Anti-Trafficking and Labour Exploitation Unit, and will be coming to us from the Sheffield office. Lindsay is the training coordinator there, and we'll talk about expertise-based training for legal practitioners in training. And at this point, I also want to mark, I suppose, a sense of recognition and best wishes to our RENATE co-president, Yvonne van der Kar, who should really be sitting beside us here today. But unfortunately, Yvonne is in hospital in the Netherlands. She is unwell and has been there since Sunday. And I know full well that she is not supposed to be plugged in and listening to this, but she will be. So Yvonne, we're exposing you. We're just revealing the cards here. Unplug, switch off, and mind yourself. But Mary is here as co-president, and Yvonne, as I say, as the other co-president, should have been with us, but we send our very best wishes to Yvonne. So Lindsay, if you are ready, we will give you the floor for the next 10 to 15 minutes, please.
Hi everyone, thanks for the introduction, and thanks to the previous two speakers, particularly Phil and Sosa. I found that really interesting and inspiring to hear that journey described in that way. So it's really good for me to reflect on my practice as a lawyer, listening to that. So yeah, I'm an immigration solicitor and the public law supervisor at ATLU, the Anti-Trafficking and Labour Exploitation Unit. I have been the training lead at ATLU for the sort of past 3 or 4 years, helped by some colleagues whilst I've been on maternity leave at times. I'm actually now transitioned into a new role, which is strategic litigation lead, and we've recruited a new colleague to be the training lead in the near future. So that's very exciting. But I'm going to talk about the program that we've been delivering in the last 3 to 4 years. If you could do the next slide. And just to say a bit more about ATLU before I go on, we're the only legal charity in the UK that only represents survivors of modern slavery. We have 3 teams: an immigration team, compensation team, and housing and support, which does the public law stuff as well. So we try to do a holistic legal service. You know, lots of our clients will have cases in different teams, and as well as that, we do training and policy work. So because all of our clients are survivors of modern slavery, rather than in most kind of immigration or public law teams, it will be a handful of clients in that situation. All of our clients are in that situation. So we do develop a lot of expertise in that area. In terms of our training program, you know, I think before I started at ATLU around 4 years ago, we did deliver training in a kind of ad hoc basis, but then we were lucky to receive funding to sort of do a more comprehensive training program, and we offer that to support professionals, although legal representatives can attend those sessions if they want, and it can be quite good having that interaction in the training sessions between support professionals and legal reps. And we also do training specifically for legal aid, legal representatives. Well, not always people who do legal aid, but that's the large proportion of people we're training. So just very briefly about what we deliver for support professionals, because that's not the focus of what I'm talking about today. We do kind of overview training, so people who might come across a victim of modern slavery would at least know the main flags that they need to be thinking about, the main issues where they might want to refer someone for advice or think about safeguarding and things like that. And then we also offer 6 practical, more in-depth sessions, which we think would really cover a good base for the main issues that might come up for those who are supporting victims of modern slavery. And a lot of that is how to interact with the lawyers who are doing their cases to make sure the lawyers are doing a good job. So maybe like how to find the lawyer, and then how to push the lawyer to go further, how to understand what legal challenges that lawyer might do. And actually, in some cases, support professionals can carry out some of these legal challenges, even though they're not lawyers themselves. So we teach on how you can do that without damaging someone's case, being very cautious about your limitations in your role and, you know, what you may not be aware of in the case and things like that. And then, so for legal representatives, we also run the overviews, and then we run a program called @Law, which I will explain on the next slide. So next slide, please. Okay, so we devised @Law in response to the issues that we've been talking about today, the need for more in-depth training for legal representatives, because what you find is that there are lots of seminars and webinars that lawyers attend and get their CPD points or their continuous professional development, that give lawyers like a flavour of you know, how trafficking cases should be run, what kind of issues are out there, but putting that into practice is something else. If you know, if you're working in a firm where no one else is doing that kind of work, maybe it's not really the culture in that firm to do many judicial reviews or any, then it can be that there's just a lot of barriers for you to actually put what you're being taught on into practice. so we just tried to deliver a program which would give people more support that so they could actually practically work with what they're being trained on. So we collaborated. Well, basically, so we've done it for the last 3 years. It's 4 in-depth sessions where we basically run through the course of a case and all the different legal issues that might crop up, safeguarding issues, client care issues, what Sosa was talking about really eloquently, the sort of relationship of trust that is vital between a legal representative and their client, how you go about making that possible. All these different issues that they're often very specific to working with survivors of modern slavery. And even if you're someone that's worked with vulnerable people like asylum seekers, say, for many years, some issues will just be very different and you have to really get your head around them. So one thing that is really central is, that modern slavery is an ongoing process, and often when you're trying to assist someone, they will still be getting threats or still be in debt to someone and just not be able to ever, say, disclose everything. So how do you work around that as a legal representative without putting too much pressure on someone, but still being able to get the right result for them? So we're trying to improve the quality, availability and sustainability of legal representation across the UK. So we're also looking to try to give more support to lawyers who are not in London, where there is, less developed legal advice sector than in London. Give legal aid lawyers who are lacking confidence to have that confidence to push cases further. Okay, so, it was delivered by myself and a variety of different colleagues I work with, and in the last session we looked at how to instruct medical experts in a lot of detail. So Eileen Walsh from the Helen Bamber Foundation joined us for that session. Next slide. So I've just pulled out some information from an evaluation we've done from AtLaw 2022. So that was looking at that program and the year before, but AtLaw 2023 was quite similar. We just haven't done the evaluation for it yet because we've just finished it. But we've managed to train each year around 40 odd participants. We've just been able to advertise it as best we can, really, by delivering some free overview sessions through kind of organisations like the Immigration Law Practitioners Association and DG Legal. So they're people that can reach out to a lot of legal reps out there. And then on those free overview sessions, we advertise the AtLaw programme, which is also free. But the main barrier to people is if they can give up the time. So we try to, make it doable, and we have adjusted that as the years go on. And now we do kind of 4 sessions of 2 hours each. And then in between those sessions, we do have mentoring, which we've found to be really useful. So, when you're doing an online Zoom training, it's just the reality that people often don't feel comfortable to speak up because they feel a bit embarrassed by being in a larger group. And we do have a bit of a range of experience of people that attend. So in the mentoring groups, there's less people and it's just a kind of free-flowing discussion so people can talk about cases that they're working with at the moment and get tips from each other. And we found that to be a really supportive idea. And, it's really helped people to, really think about what they've been learning. And yeah, we've managed to have a lot of different organisations come to the AtLaw session. So in 2022, there's 33 different organisations, mainly legal aid, solicitors, a couple of barristers who are training and working in the field. And most people were already representing survivors of modern slavery, but some people were kind of looking to start doing that. And next slide. So we do actually spend a lot of time pairing the materials. We give a course handout, which is basically the size of a book in a PDF document. It takes a very long time to make and update each year. And we provide a precedent pack. So what we're saying to people that attend our course is, yes, you're going to lose that 2 hours times 4 sessions to come train with us, but we're going to make it worth your while by saving you time when you actually need to do representations with quite a comprehensive precedent pack that would relate to different types of legal aid challenges. So I think people found those materials really helpful. And they also get CPD, so that's another benefit. Next slide. So yeah, the mentoring group, I've kind of spoken about this already. We did actually, we have, it says that they're for people based outside London, but we have had mentoring groups for people inside London as well. And yeah, it was not offered to everyone because some people were definitely more experienced and attended the training, and we're happy for them to attend because everyone can always learn more in this sector. But there's definitely, when we're reviewing applications of who had asked to be on the ATLAW program, there were people who we thought would benefit more from the mentoring program. And like I said, they were a really valuable part of the training. And that is definitely a new idea you don't really see advertised in other trainings that legal aid lawyers get access to. So yeah, judgment-free zone kind of idea. Next slide. So we get feedback at the end of the training, and everyone's been really positive. Out of the 15 responses we had in 2022, 14 people said it was excellent. One person said it was 4 out of 5. They're pretty good. Yeah, people thought it was really useful, and there was loads of comments, but I'm not going to put them on all on the slides. But I think people did appreciate the detail and the kind of practical examples. We did a lot of group work as well. Next slide. Oh, so this is more from the feedback, but the idea of ATLAW was to do more than just your normal kind of webinar that you might attend. It was to really change people's practice. So you'll see from this slide, people agree that I'm going to actually change my practice. It's given me more confidence. I can recognize indicators of slavery more. Given me more confidence around safeguarding. That was a big theme in the training, just hammering home that it's not written down on anything that you might learn in your formal legal training that you're going to be expected to help safeguard your clients. It only becomes apparent when you start working with this group of clients, because going missing and being re-trafficked is a major issue. In the past, I've had many clients who've gone missing whilst I've been representing them. So, how to deal with that in terms of legally protecting them if someone goes missing, or maybe how to work with someone to try to maybe prevent someone going missing, is a big part of the training, which is not strictly like legal training, but it's important. More likely to refer survivors to advice in other areas of law. That's another big issue that maybe comes from ATLAW's experience as a holistic service, because often the various different parts of law that a survivor can get access to, even that lawyer won't be properly aware of the different areas of law that person could get advice on. So really hammering that home, because once they get referrals to many different lawyers, things start to really fall into place for someone. Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of them, but doing legal challenges, particularly judicial reviews, was another aim of the training, because in modern slavery law in the UK, there basically is no automatic right of appeal against any decision that arises out of the national referral mechanism process or the kind of support that someone could have access to. There's just no automatic rights of appeal. So you are going to end up going to judicial review in many cases. So it's hard to always be ready for that and to go all the way if necessary. Okay, next slide. Oh, sorry, on the last slide, one aspect I was just going to mention was another big thread in the training was how to ensure you can understand how you can do all of this work on legal aid and how it can actually be funded in the UK. But you have to sort of be smart about, you know, how your case is presented in order to make sure it's funded. And then looking to the future, we're definitely planning to run this course again. We normally run it in the autumn every year. Like I said, we've got a new training lead who's been recruited, and we're always trying to develop this model. I mean, I would say that we're still pretty much in the pilot phase. It's going well, but I'd like to see if we can push it further, you know, possibly make it more formal. And we're grateful for funding from the Legal Education Foundation, who basically funded my role, and then I was able to develop the training. And the Bearing Foundation as well has funded our training for support professionals particularly. But yeah, we're looking for a more financially sustainable model always as well. Some firms have contacted us to kind of ask for a sort of version of that law just for them, you know, so that's another thing we're looking at. Jeff, and any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Okay, Lindsay, thank you very, very much. It was a very comprehensive overview. I'm not so sure if we have questions from the floor just yet, and there might be questions in the chat that we might revert to afterwards as well. And I think in terms of our schedule of keeping to time, there are some other speakers who will be coming after you, Lindsay. So I think that unless there's anything from the floor here in the room, I think we'll move it on and express our gratitude to you, Lindsay, for taking the time. You've given us not only the insights in terms of the training, but the breadth and depth of training. You've provided us with some practical insights into training and mentoring, and additionally to the demands that are unique to providing online training that must in its own right stand as unique demands for everybody concerned. It's interesting that you highlighted the practitioner's advice and work that has much higher impacts by seeking to enhance the knowledge of colleagues. So it kind of made me that a bit more aware around the importance of interdependency, codependency, and that sharing of best practice, key nuggets of wisdom that transcend all professions, really, that informs all professions. So thank you kindly, Lindsay, for giving so generously of your time in preparation and for sharing your information and the slides and joining us online. Okay, so that brings us to our next speaker, Cristina Carrera, who will be with us online. Cristina is joining us from the Spanish NGO Diaconia in Spain, and will speak to us on the value of legal practitioners' work. And just a little bit about Diaconia in Spain. It is a social entity orientated towards action and work with the most vulnerable people, and to facilitate their social integration and development, improvement of their living conditions, and the restoration of their rights. So, Cristina, if you're ready to join us, and I will remind you, Cristina, that we are sticking to time. So there's 10 to 15 minutes afforded you, and I might just break in if I see that you might be running over time, just to make sure that we stick to time for the end for people who might like to ask questions or make comments that can inform us for future practice. So over to you, Cristina.
Thank you. Well, you know me pretty well. Thanks for the reminder. Thank you, Reid, and Brian, and all the RENATE team. My accent is not as beautiful as yours. I'm so sorry. I'm based in Spain, in Madrid. I'm just a practicing attorney, a barrister, according to the UK legal terminology, working and committed to the underprivileged rights for 31 years. For the last 5 years, I'm heading all the legal strategies and actions for the Agonia, as has already been mentioned. And I'm really happy to see some familiar faces, especially my colleague, my dearest Cristina Ramirez, coordinating all the Catholic non-profit Oblatas work based in Spanish territories as difficult as the Canary Island. And also my colleague, my dearest Lorena Justa, advocating on a permanent basis for the Agonia and combating human trafficking. As I said, I'm just a practicing attorney, barrister. I deal with non-judicial and judicial work towards Spanish courts. I also do some training for law enforcement bodies, magistrates, prosecutors in Spain, and for the Europol, using their training school, CPOL, in Budapest every year. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you today. My commitment and my goal is to highlight how important is the legal work, especially taking and using brand words to building trust with survivors, and also using a victim-centered approach. Sometimes we're not aware on how difficult survivors' life is, even though they have already left the exploitation behind. And if we go on to the next slide, please. And also, okay, to the next one. Thank you. As you're all probably aware, we do not have in Spain a fully devoted act in combating human trafficking. We do have different norms, protocols, strategies, but we do not have a specific act enacted to combat human trafficking. That makes the life of us working in frontline very difficult, but it also provides us a big margin of independence and creativity. That's why we in Spain work using the 4 Ps of the very first convention, UN Convention for eliminating the discrimination against women, the CEDAW. So we do prevention work, we do prosecution, we do protection of victims, and we do partnerships. Because we need to bear in mind, as has already been mentioned, that human trafficking is not only a very serious crime, it's also a very serious violation of human rights. And it's also a cultural and economical phenomenon all over the world, which is fed by poverty, affecting normally underprivileged individuals. So using that perspective, if we go to the next slide, I would like to provide you just with some data on my country, on Spain. If we go to the next one, thank you. Spain is the main destination country regarding human trafficking. Unfortunately, more than 39% of men in Spain have paid at least once for sex. And we are the first prostitution demanding country in Europe. I'm not saying that all prostitution is human trafficking, but I think that we can all agree that prostitution is the main entrance to further exploitation. And we are the third country in the world with regards to prostitution demanding services country. We just have Thailand and Puerto Rico above us. If gone to the following slide, thank you. We all know that 92% of women and girls are in sexual exploitation. If we take all the overall data, every 30 seconds, a person becomes a human trafficking victim. And unfortunately, only 1 out of 20 victims are formally identified. If we go to the following slide, thank you. I would like to highlight why we strongly believe that it is a win-win alliance if we legal practitioners work together with law enforcement bodies and other frontline players, and I'm including magistrates and judges. I'm including law enforcement bodies, so policemen and policewomen. I'm including journal attorneys. And allow me to use the words of our Spanish Attorney General in combating human trafficking. Human trafficking, for combating human trafficking, is not enough to have the technical skills. We also need to believe that people suffering of human trafficking situations are victims and they are needed to be treated as victims. So we need to have this special sensitivity and empathy and approach in understanding how difficult it is for a survivor of human trafficking, it is still a victim according to criminal law, to provide coherent data, coherent story, and to be brave, serene, and trained enough to intervene in telling their own stories. Why do we believe that there is a win-win alliance among all of us? Because law enforcement bodies do investigation, formal identification, they initiate legal actions, but we, legal practitioners, we provide relevant data. We have access based on trust with the survivors that allow us to be always updated what is going on in their lives. And of course, we represent them towards the courts in order to provide them access to their own rights, because we cannot forget that apart from being victims as survivors, they are subject of rights, and they're accessing to rights to be always provided and secured. If we go to the following one, which I just have 4 minutes, that's why in doing all the legal work, it's key to build trust. It's key to manage their fear. We need to be reminded that sometimes they come from countries in which lawyers, magistrates, policemen and women, law enforcement bodies are corrupted, and they have been threatened and they have been misled by them. So it's really, they suffer from fear, and it's really difficult for us to build this trust. And I'd like to say that when approaching our legal work with survivors, we need to build relationships with them based on trust and respect. Data is not the key matter. We legal practitioners have access to updated data, especially if we work for non-profits, as it is myself. We know if that survivors has had a good night or nightmares, if suddenly somebody's contacted him or her, if suddenly he or she appears using luxury clothes and unexpected money. And again, even if we just intervene, are supposed to intervene when the crime has been committed, so doing prosecution, I do not completely agree with that. We have also a very special role in prevention. That's why we train, that's why we investigate, that's why we do research, and that's why we try to run law enforcement bodies in what is going on in a special area. And if we have the testimonies of certain survivors, even though there's not a criminal investigation or judicial case in place, his or her information and data can help us to prevent by monitoring and following what is going on in that specific area or with a specific group of persons. That's why I really thank Lindsay for the strategic litigation work they are dealing with. If we go to the following slide, and I am about to finish, to the following one, and I just want to highlight, and again to the following one, thank you very much. Just a general flavor, if we go to the following one, of what is going on in the digital world. Online recruitment has become a very common recruitment way now. So offline recruitment is not that common anymore. Now, most of the recruitments for human trafficking are dealt in the online environment. But the online environment is not only the method used for recruitment, it's also an exploitation place. We all know, and we have also all have access to these streaming videos providing very explicit sexual intercourses, most of the times not consented, not agreed by the victim. How these victims, potential victims, are recruited by fake job offers published in the internet. Sugar dating. Sugar dating is using the power to engage very young people as sugar babies, and recruiting them for further exploitation, fake advertising campaigns, OnlyFans, Instagram, Facebook are very much used. If we go to the following slide, and I am about to finish, if we go to the following one, and to the next one, thank you. Why we strongly believe that legal work cannot only be limited to intervene when the crime has already been in place, and why we think prevention is key. It's key for early detection. It's key to avoid risky situations. It's key to collaborate and to cooperate with law enforcement bodies in further investigations. It's key to monitor and control the human trafficking phenomenon, because above all, we're talking about victims and survivors, which are aimed to gain autonomy and independence because they are subject of rights. So they need to have a quick and effective access to their own rights. Unfortunately, I need to run. I cannot be with you until the very end because of unexpected emergency with a lady we are accompanying in her path to this independent and autonomous and free life. So I'm so sorry. I need to leave you now and run. Thank you very much. And I will, any question will be welcome, and I can deal with them at a later stage through Ruth or Anta or Anne. So thanks very much for your patience and for allowing me to use my not that accurate English to communicate and to share the Spanish experience with you. Thanks again.
Perfectly clear, Christina. Thank you very, very much. That was quite an inspiring presentation. I think, again, it's interesting to see the repetition of themes coming through, not least being building trust, relationship, taking the time, investing in the people who we're working with, and also coming through was how the message of how much more impactful and powerful we can be through collaboration and through taking time together. Interesting little reminder about the online environment for recruitment and exploitation, which of course is another dimension for legal professions in the context of the complexity of the field that human trafficking is, and therefore for legal professions to try and contend with so many layers and layers to this particular crime. Thank you very much, Christina. We leave you and move to Milam Danusha from Different and Equal, an NGO in Albania, working on reintegration services for Albanian victims of human trafficking. And Milan will speak to us on the importance of a unified human trafficking law for legal practitioners. Welcome, Milan.
Thank you. Thank you to the RENATE team for creating us the possibility to be part of this research and to share our information, which is included in the research. And thank you very much for the possibility to speak about an important issue, which is one of our main issue, in fact. I'm speaking the name of the organization that I represent, Different and Equal, but we work together with other organizations, and we have advocating for years now for the need for a special law for the protection of victims of trafficking. In fact, there are a lot of needs, but I will be focused in the main reasons why is needed a special law for the protection of victims of trafficking. And I will start to share with you the fact that Albania is based in the Albanian legal system is based on a civil law, which means detailed legal provisions to regulate a certain relationship. It's just to justify why a special law is needed for this field. Please, the next slide, please. Okay. At first, a special law serves as a framework law in which all measures for the protection of victims of trafficking are integrated and completed in a single act. Drafting a special law is the opportunity to make a more complete regulation for all areas, including prevention, prosecution, coordination, and in particular, the protection of victims of trafficking, solving also the problems created in reference to various laws and bylaws that regulate specific aspects of the anti-trafficking field. Clearly, the law defines the responsible structures and mechanisms for the protection of victims at the central and local level. Definition by law of all the structures, but mainly the coordinating authority would increase the efficiency and cooperation of all state institutions and civil society, as well as facilitating the mechanisms for the protection of victims of trafficking are regulated in a joint agreement which do not have the appropriate effectiveness in implementation as the law. Also, the law would highlight the many efforts and measures that have been taken by the government in this direction. The law serves as an instrument to guarantee effective protection based on a pro-victim approach strategy. The pro-victim approach concept comes in harmony with the recent changes that have been made in Albania in the framework of the justice reform. Already, the rights of victims of crime and bylaws recently approved as part of this justice reform. Even in the spirit of changes that are expected to occur as part of the drafting process of a new criminal procedure code, there will be a separate chapter on the rights of victims of crime and specific regulation for victims of trafficking. If a pro-victim approach is guaranteed by a special law, the law itself would serve as an educational instrument for law enforcement and justice institutions who still, unfortunately, have a mentality oriented toward the perpetrators and less on victims. The law helps for a clear several terms related to the phenomenon of human trafficking. This is also has consequences and a lack of clear definition in other legal acts, including criminal code and criminal procedure code, has influenced on that situations. This lack of clarity and wrong interpretation has brought several problems in practice, affecting the way of investigating and judging cases of human trafficking. These problems have been addressed in several reports, but in 2022 there is unified decision of Supreme Court who speak in details about the problems that affected the practice. The next slide, please. Okay. The law serves to guarantee the compensation of victims of trafficking. I know that the issue of compensation is a problem even for the other countries, but in Albania still remains an unsolved challenge, mostly due to the lack of an effective legal mechanism that should guarantee compensation. A special law for the protection of victims of trafficking is the appropriate instrument to establish a state compensation scheme for victims of trafficking and to fill the legal gaps for compensation through judicial process. From practice, there are only 2 cases represented in court by lawyers of different and equal organization in cooperation with another partner NGO, which ended in favor of the victim. But these 2 decisions taken in favor of the victims have not yet been executed due to problems related to the execution and the lack of guarantee from the state for this purpose. A special law encourages and improves the cooperation of victims of trafficking with law enforcement structures. By providing a better protection for victims of trafficking, the law would promote and improve cooperation with law enforcement structures, which directly affects the progress of the investigation and judgment of the case of human trafficking, as well as the increase in the number of sentences for these issues. These are concerns raised repeatedly by the TIP report, the European Commission, and the Greta reports. A special law serves also for the creation of the function of the National Rapporteur for issues of human trafficking, a function that in Albania we don't have that kind of institution. The law is the right legal instrument, we believe, that would help to establish this new independent function chosen by the parliament, which would only have the task of making reports and on the implementation of the national anti-trafficking measures and strategy. The establishment of such a mechanism is recommended by the EU directive, as you know. And finally, a special law would better solve the situation of determining the status of victims of trafficking. The law would also better regulate the process of formal identification for victims of trafficking by guaranteeing a more effective protection of victims' rights. It promotes proactive identification and self-identification. In addition, the law also resolves the situation of determining the status of victims of trafficking, providing for a complaint mechanism at the administrative level and in court, a mechanism which is missing and is not resolved in the standard operation procedures for the identification of victims of trafficking. There are also other reasons, but I will conclude here to wait for a question or any other comments for the content of for the needs for that special law for the protection of victims of trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milan. That was a very, very interesting insight that you provided for us, specifically around the details information in Albania. and the importance of a standardized, unified human trafficking law for legal practitioners. It was interesting that the focus of your presentation was all the while on the victim-centered element, which informs our practice, of course, but ultimately aiding the beneficiaries. I think that standardized procedures around legal professions for identifying the victims of trafficking is a concern across Europe. Not just in the area in Albania that you spoke about, but it's one that all jurisdictions have to contend with. So thank you, Milan, for taking the time, for giving us, and sticking to the time, but for giving us such a comprehensive report. I'm not sure that there are any questions here from the floor. And as we had said earlier, if there's anything in the chat, we'll come back to it later on if time allows. So without further ado, I will hand over and introduce you to the Acting Director of the Bakita Centre for Research on Slavery, Exploitation and Abuse here at St. Mary's University, our very dear colleague, Dr. Carol Murphy, who will join us here at the desk. And over to you, Carol, if you want to share with us, please. Carol has been a constant throughout the research, and not only this research, but previous researches. So we feel she's very much one of our own. So over to you, Carol.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here, and I know that everyone has been thanked multiple times, but I'm going to just say thanks again to everybody. I'm not going to pick out anyone in particular. It's just fantastic. But what I want to do is I want to pick up on some of the things that were talked about earlier on. I'm going to come to you, Brian, and something that you said that really struck me. Don't look so scared. It's okay. So you talked about networking, and you talked about the strength in networking. And I wanted to pick up on that because I think there is a power and a strength in networking. And obviously this research wouldn't have happened without the networks of RENATE and without the networks of us. And we built up those networks with people like Imelda and with yourselves over the years through ANTA and other ways. And I suppose in a way that leads me to kind of reflect on the Bakita Centre as a conduit for things to happen. It's not any one particular person, not me as the director or not anybody else. It's us as a team, as a conduit to make things happen. That's the way I see it. For me, reflecting on network and what I was thinking of was, you know, there's different elements to it. And one of them is reaching out to people out there, finding out what's going on, being interested in what people are doing, listening to people, connecting with people and inviting people in to our space. And then I wanted to reflect a bit on some of the stuff that Sosa spoke about professional curiosity and what he said about tell me your story. And it reminded me of something that I used to always teach in my lectures on qualitative interviewing. And I refer to a very famous Pulitzer Prize winning American historian and author called Studs Terkel. And he was interviewed, and what he said is about interviewing people, and he was an excellent interviewer. He said, the first thing I'd say to any interviewer is listen. It's the second thing I'd say too, and the third and the fourth. Listen, 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 listen. And if you do, people will talk. Why? Because no one has ever listened to them before. And I just found that so profound. I mean, every time I say it, it almost makes me cry. Genuinely, like, wow, you know, this is so true. You know, we don't generally in our life, we're waiting to have our next conversation. We're waiting to have our words, but to sit down and really, truly listen to people, I think that's an amazing skill. And I'm really glad that you found someone to listen to you, Sosa. And it also, I think, linked to me also about the whole area of cultural competency. And we did a project earlier on this year in partnership with Imelda and Mary Ward Loreto in Albania around cultural competency. And we wrote in that with ANTA the concept of cultural humility as well. And so for me, there's something about being humble in interactions with people and thinking about cultures all sorts of cultures of nation, of race, of ethnicity, of class, gender, sexuality, religion, their cultures in all the differences in the ways that we're different. We don't have to be expert on all these things though. What we do have to do is to be curious, to be humble, and we need to listen. Thank you.
Not a very tall order, really. I think as we approach the weekend and start thinking of how we should be more faithful to our I suppose one would say the baptismal callings, but more faithful to humanity, to our sense of being human beings. So thank you, Carol. I think just in line with the commitments earlier, if there were any questions from the floor, I said we might give a few minutes or any comments. And when I say a few minutes, I really do mean a few minutes. So if there is anything anybody would like, now is the time to speak up or forever hold your peace. And there's nothing from the floor, Brian. Okay, Brian, yes.
Just one thing that Carol said that really struck me. Go closer to all. Thank you, and no, it's only one. It's a really quick comment. It's just one thing that Carol said that struck me. In school, we were always told that listening is the most important part of talking, and it kind of goes to exactly what you've just been saying.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you very much. We just forget it. We're so busy to want to talk. That's the thing. So, Imelda, I see your hand is up.
In the actual research, there was a comment made by a researcher that that although in Albania there had been 2 acknowledgements of the demand for compensation for traffic victims, and you've gone through right to the end, so they were to get compensation, but they didn't. But the assets were seized, and many traffickers, not many, but a number, have been prosecuted, and assets were seized. And the assets have been used to pay the wages demanded by international tip reports of shelter staff. My question to Miriam is, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Imelda, for the question. In fact, in Albania, there is a special law, so-called anti-mafia law, which foreseen the processes of confiscation and sequestration of assets to the traffickers and to all the perpetrators that deals with organized crime. And there is a possibility to use these assets and money confiscated to use for programs and for even for the compensation of trafficking. In Article 32 of that law, it is foreseen that 50% of the confiscated assets and money confiscated from organized crime goes to finance programs, institutions that fight against organized crime, and especially even for the compensation of victims of trafficking. But as I mentioned during my presentation, there is a lack of effective mechanism that made functioning that space of the law. It is not regulated how to use that assets or that monies that are confiscated from organized crime to use for the compensation of victims of trafficking. And that's why we emphasize the fact that there is needed a special law even for that issue to create and to make effective state scheme that guarantee the compensation of victims of trafficking and facilitate even the judicial process, that the cases that have filed a compensation process in the court. there is also a strategy for the compensation of victims of crimes, but the strategy remains a strategy, and that's why is needed a law. It is a fact that even our organization and the other organization are being donated, financed for several projects from the national agency that take care of the sequestration and confiscation assets. It is a good news, but we don't have any fact or to say what to say about the compensation of victims of trafficking. Thank you.
Okay, Milan, thank you very much for that, and thank you for the question, Imelda. There's another from the floor, and then we will start going to a close. So,
I just kind of have a question for Sosa, as a survivor. What I typically hear with like legal practitioners is that, especially in terms of criminal exploitation, is that they apply the narrative of a victim as like a loophole in the legal system, instead of like making it that this is an actual victim and this is something they've actually been through. And since you tend to have like a really good solicitor, how did you sort of feel, you know, being heard that you've been exploited? What sort of came up? Did you believe that you was a victim, or was this something that you thought, right, this can get me off of my criminal charges?
For me,
because otherwise
I think it's fine.
For me, it was the fact of, I wouldn't say that I looked at it as, oh yeah, this is part of my charges. It was the fact of, it was normalized. So it was when someone's telling me, oh, you've been groomed and you're a survivor of child molestation, at that moment in time, I didn't understand what child molestation was, because to me, this is normal. This is how I live. And to me, my solicitor was probably not talking a language that I understood at that moment in time. But it was also a thing where, as she was breaking it down, I was able to understand that, okay, that if now, how can I explain? When it was explained to me in a different context, where if now it happens to your children rather than yourself, how would you feel? And me as a parent, I'm able to then take myself out of the picture and realize, okay, this is wrong, because at the end of the day, I wouldn't allow it to happen to my children. Why is it okay for it to happen to me? You know what I'm saying?
Very much. Thank you for the question. Okay, so before I wrap it up, I want to hand over to our co-president, RENATE co-president Mary Power, who is going to acknowledge the work and draw proceedings to an end, and then I'll close. So over to you, Mary. And you're wearing two hats. You have both Yvonne van de Kar with you and yourself. So well,
all I can say is wow. We've had so much, and I just feel, you know, but I feel very positive and very hopeful that so much is being done, and so many people are actually involved in this at a very personal and real level. On behalf of the core group and the working board of RENATE, I want to thank everybody involved, particularly St. Mary's, because you've been a pleasure to work with, and all of us in RENATE who used our contacts to get people to talk and to fill in the form or what have you. I just want to say we're very proud of this report. It's smashing. Not least the content, of course, but also the presentation is very good. And I just want to thank everybody involved in this, particularly. And I want to thank Anne for stepping in to do the moderation today. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
And to all of you for coming, and especially to the people online. I hope they were able to hear everything and see everything they needed to hear. I think they did, because they let us know early on when they didn't. So,
and indeed, Yvonne van de Kar is online and sends her very best wishes.
She's texting.
Contrary to her medical advisors, we know Yvonne, we know
Patricia Mulhall,
another
sick bed.
Yes.
So anyway, that just goes to show you the commitment of people in RENATE. And I just want to remind people about the report, the important thing, to download it on our website, on the Batista Centre website. If you can't get it for some reason, which won't happen, but just in case, contact Brian or Anta, I think, and they will help you to do that. So we're really very grateful for this momentous piece of work, which has been going on for a couple of years now. And I think the funders will be very proud of it too. So we hope some of them joined us on the Zoom. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, so Mary.
Can I just say?
Oh, Imelda, yes.
Mary and Yvonne will have been working very, very silently and hugely to get to the end of this. And I think you should be glad for it.
And I think that, you know, when all is said and done, the different elements of contributions from the legal practitioners themselves, from the people at grassroots level. Sorry, is there somebody else?
No, it's okay.
No.
Stop interrupting.
Yeah, no. I wish I had eyes in the back of my head. Is there somebody else up there? There's so much richness in this report. And the beauty of the layout is that there's academic work interspersed with the spoken word. So that if we are listening, these practitioners are telling us their story. And there are nuggets in there. It's a particular style of research that's very appealing to people nowadays. And I want to commend St. Mary's and in particular Carol for ensuring that this is the style of research that goes out that is user-friendly and that can appeal to people and that it can sit in your bedroom, on the desk, at work.
Spiritual reading.
Yes, and it's something, you know, when you wake at night and you just can't sleep and something is in your head, you're going to just say, what did they say? There was a thought or a phrase. And one of those is just, I think that it's something that struck me when I was going through the research. And I want to finish it with this. Certainly from when I started, what you have seen is law firms shut their legal aid practices on lots of different areas. Welfare benefits almost disappeared. So you've got the survivors facing the barrier of the legal aid desert, plus also it's a specialism within a specialism, which makes it more acute for survivors of trafficking. And that is on page 99 for anybody who wants to go back through that. It's layered with a messages, that particular quotation, as indeed are lots of the other quotations, but that particular one, there's the reality of what life is, but there's also the possibility of the future and hope. And in that regard, I think I'll draw this to a conclusion by saying thank you to all who've been here and take away the phrase from Sousa, tell me your story. When you encounter, be it the survivor or those who, even our own, in terms of our own colleagues at work and those within the various professions we work with, tell me your story. So well done to everybody. Congratulations to the team. And there are some refreshments at the back. And we look forward to seeing you at the next launch.
Yeah, so can I encourage people, tea, coffee, water, just some fruit sticks, there's some biscuits.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. Doggy bags to the home. Oh, my.